So he says that is absolutely bogus. Again, I want to go back to this. My name is Dr. George Walters-Sleyon, and we are discussing uh, Platonic, uh, what I call Platonic Socratic dialogues. And in these sessions, we are emphasizing or looking at Plato's, three of Plato's dialogues. They are Euthyphro, Apology, and Crito. The reason for this is to explore them and to see to what extent these dialogues inform our worldview today or have influenced our worldview or can help us to develop a sense of conceptual understanding of issues. Plato in these dialogues is writing about Socrates and Socrates' experiences with the council and Socrates' philosophy as well. So it's important for us, in my view, and the reason why I'm embarking on this is just to have a conversation and raise the need for us to begin to explore the question as to whether philosophy has any valid influence on social change. To what extent we can begin to look at philosophy and think about social change. I teach philosophy, introduction to philosophy, apply ethics, world religions, criminology, sociology, and criminal justice, world religions, Bunker Hill Community College as well. And I've gone through most of Plato's dialogue, and sometimes we're just influenced by the need to talk about these dialogues and just to explore them with other people. Okay. Again, let me share my screen here. Go back to this. Again, this is the flyer I have been using, and it's up there. And we'll be talking about this periodically for a couple of Saturdays. Again, from Euthyphro to Apology and Crito, focusing on Euthyphro today. Okay, Euthyphro was written as a dialogue, Platonic dialogue around 380 BCE. Again, what is important as we come to understand it is the emphasis on the question of serving the Greek gods, Socrates serving the Greek gods, etc., or being accused of introducing a new concept of God. So, again, who were the philosophical rivals during Socrates' era? They were the sophists. The most prominent founder of the sophists is Protagoras, who believed that man is the measure of all things. That is, man is the one that places value on anything. That there is nothing that has value without the import of man. That is, we can say the sky is green or the sky is yellow, even though it might be blue. Okay? So what is sophism? Sophism, an argument apparently correct in form, but actually often quite invalid. Okay, such an argument used to deceive. That's what the Merriam-Webster dictionary says. The sophists believe that human perception, not external objective reality, that is, nothing beyond us, or this concept of God or transcendent truth, or objective truth, or objective reality, or let's say the immaterial world, define our worldview. The sophists do not believe in that concept at all to determine truth, because for the sophist, everything is relative. Truth is relative, it's subjective, it's based on human experience. These were the rivals of Socrates and Plato. They emphasized human matters over cosmic speculation, focused on teaching practical skills like rhetoric to succeed in public life, and viewed morality and virtue as human conventions that could be learned and taught rather than innate. That is, the sophists believe that there is nothing beyond our natural material reality that informs our daily lives that we ought to consider. So the sophists believe that everything, again, is very subjective based on our experience. So for the sophists, if you talk about objective truth, they say that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Okay. For the sophists, is the subjectivity of truth, focus on humanity, skeptical of the gods. As a matter of fact, a lot of them were atheistic, if not agnostic. Rhetoric and persuasion. One of the most prominent, sophist was Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus' major statement was, might makes right. Now listen to this. Protagoras says, man is the measure of all things. Thrasymachus, another famous sophist, says, might makes right. Now, it isn't might makes right in favor of the oppressed, as compared to might makes right in favor of the strong. I hope you understand that. They say might makes right not in favor of the weak, but in favor of the strong. The advantage of the stronger is just for the sophist. Because what is justice? Justice is just the stronger doing what they want to do to their own advantage. Sophism, again, you will begin to make some connection here. When might and strength and strong and the strong feels that they control everything. For Thrasymachus, he says, yes, that's okay. And that was sophism. Again, they say virtue, ethics are not innate. That is, there isn't anything beyond us, revelation, quote unquote, that will be found in religion or theology that largely informs our worldview. They say, no, what informs our worldview is our five senses or our five senses and our experience or experiences. Because for the sophist, everything is relative, it's a form of subjectivism and rejection of objective truth. Truth, again, for the sophist, is not absolute. So Thrasymachus' philosophy, particularly as presented in Plato's Republic, argues that justice is simply the advantage of the stronger. Justice is simply the advantage of the stronger. He claims that right and unright are not objective truths, but are created by those in power to serve their own interest. As a matter of fact, a lot of the sophists were members of the Greek council. There were senators as well. There were people who were wealthy, high in the social escalon and hierarchy, but there were professional rhetoricians and professional sophists who, to a large extent, used the law to advance their own interest. Is it because even the law itself is in the interest of the strong, and that the law should be used to advance our own interest? And so when Thrasymachus says justice is simply the advantage of the stronger, and that right and unright are not objective truth, but are created by those in power to serve their own interest. That is a very profound statement in political philosophy, public policy, social relationships, etc., etc. But that was the worldview of the sophists, or that was the worldview that would come to influence, okay, what would be called modernity to a large extent and postmodernity. We live in an era today now of postmodernity, just to let you know. Therefore, following the law, according to Thrasymachus, which he equated with justice, means obeying the rulers and their self-serving agenda. So it is okay for Thrasymachus, for every ruler to use the law to serve their own interest, because the law does not support the interests of the weak and the oppressed. I mean, for Thrasymachus as a sophist, he says that is a problem. That is not something that the law ought to do. Again, for the sophist, their goal is to use the law expediently, that is, in their own interest. This perspective is a cynical view of moral and political realism, suggesting that might truly makes right and that justice is merely a social construct, reflecting the way of the will of the dominant class. And that's exactly what it is, that justice for the sophist advances the will of the dominant class. Because for Thrasymachus, might makes right. And for Protagoras, the main founder of Sophism, man is the measure of all things. That would become, or these would become points of contention between Plato, Socrates, and the Sophists. But in Euthyphro, we are confronted with Socrates making a case because he's been indicted. Socrates is best known for the Socratic method, okay, a form of cooperative argumentative dialogue that exposes ignorance and leads to understanding through critical questioning. He used a question-answer dialogue known as the Socratic method instead of lecturing. Socrates would expose contradictions in a person's belief by asking skillful questions. This method helped people arrive at their own conclusion. So for Socrates, in a dialogue or in a conversation, he begins this very probing process. He probes and probes and probes. He asks a question and probes. Okay. The goal is to bring you to a place where you even question your own conclusion and become conscious of the contradictions in what you believe. For Socrates, there are always contradictions in what we believe. The question then becomes, how do we arrive at absolute truth? Or what is absolute? And this is the case in which Socrates or Socratic philosophy becomes a contradiction or a rejection or sophistic or sophism. Socrates always had a problem with the sophist, with Protagoras and all his boys. Socrates would go on to say the unexamined life is not worth living. This maxim reflects his core belief that humans must apply reason to discover truth about themselves. He believed that true happiness was only achievable by caring for one's soul, and virtue was a form of knowledge. So for Socrates, caring for one's soul was not based on the five senses or this very material world, or this very subjective, relativistic understanding of self. For Socrates and Plato, there was a need for objective truth. And the unexamined life or the examined life is that which comes to the revelation of that particular truth. But for Socrates, truth is within the soul or is associated with the caring of the soul. So for Socrates, he has this approach. He says, I know that I know nothing. Socrates claimed that his wisdom came from recognizing his own ignorance. He would challenge those who professed to be wise. Often, he would reveal the superficiality of their understanding, which would infuriate them. So for Socrates, in contrast to what would be uh, a normative view, for Socrates, ignorance is knowledge. Ignorance is knowledge. That is the opposite of things, isn't it? For Socrates, ignorance is knowledge because he believes that by recognizing one's ignorance or ignorant notion of things, one comes to an awareness of what they don't know and begin to seek what they ought to know. So, when we read the Socratic dialogues or Euthyphro, one of the accusations from Miletus will be that Socrates claimed to be wise. He claims to be wise, and Socrates is saying, I am not wise. Furthermore, Socrates claimed to be a gadfly. He saw his role in Athenian society as a gadfly. His purpose was to stink or rouse his fellow citizens out of their complacency to examine their own beliefs. So Socrates saw himself as a fly on the wall, a fly on the wall that sees everything, but furthermore, that buzzes in the ears of everyone. Because his goal uh, is to raise this awareness for people to question reality, to question society, to question the prevailing norm towards, again, an objective understanding of truth, not a subjective one. So Socrates is very much involved with the pursuit of objective truth. And as you read Euthyphro, you come across that, and that becomes the foundation of Socratic or Platonic philosophy. That truth is intelligible, that is, truth is immaterial, that truth is objective, not a subjective relativistic notion. And furthermore, you come to realize that for Plato and Socrates, truth is it's not based on the five senses. In contrast to Thrasymachus' position that the strength makes what is justice, that justice is relative based on the strength and might of the strong. Again, you come to Plato. Okay, Plato was a wealthy Athenian, comes from that family, served in the army during the Peloponnesian War, uh, founded the academy. And uh, one of his students was Aristotle as well. So let's go to the dialogue itself, and that is Euthyphro dialogue, and see what it has for us. Because I want to encourage you to understand this dialogue to the extent to which it begins to make sense to us, and we can define our present reality. We can define our present worldview as well. How do we define the world today? How do we look at some of the things that are happening in our world today? How do we develop uh, a conceptual idea or notion of truth? I mean, of issues that we are confronted with as well. So in this dialogue here, we come across the conversation between uh, Socrates and Euthyphro. So this is the Euthyphro dialogue. If you can see it well. So Euthyphro comes to the court, and at the court, he meets Socrates. Okay? And they begin this conversation. And he asks Socrates, he says, what new thing has happened, Socrates, that you have abandoned your stomping grounds in the Lyceum and are now spending your time here around the porch of the king? For surely you too are not involved in some suits before the king, as I am. And Socrates says, oh, the Athenians don't call it a suit, Euthyphro, but a public indictment. Hey, so Euthyphro asks Socrates, what are you doing at the court? And Socrates tells him, look, I mean, Euthyphro says, I mean, you are supposed to be at your usual place in a public square or somewhere asking people questions. And Socrates responds, he says, the Athenians don't call it a suit, Euthyphro, but a public indictment. And the conversation begins. He says, what do you mean? Someone has indicted you? I suppose, since I certainly wouldn't condemn you of the opposite, you indicting someone else. So Euthyphro thinks that Socrates is at the court to indict someone. Contrary to that, Socrates says, certainly not. Okay? And then Euthyphro says, absolutely. I mean, so someone else is indicting you. Socrates says, absolutely. Now, who is this person? The question goes on, the conversation goes on. And he says, this is Socrates' response. He says, I don't know the man very well myself, Euthyphro. I think he is a young man. He's a young and unknown person. Anyway, I believe they call him Miletus. He's from the Pathian dime. And if you know, a Miletus from Pathos with straight hair, not much of a beard, but with a hooked nose. Euthyphro says, I don't know him. And so Socrates goes on. What is the charge? And he says, it's no minor charge. Here he goes on and says, I think as it is no small thing for a young man to be knowledgeable about so important an issue. For he, that's Miletus, he accuses Socrates, knows how the young are corrupted. He says Socrates is corrupting the young people. Who their corruptors are? Socrates. He probably, that's Miletus, Socrates is explaining, he's probably somebody wise in having seen how I, in my ignorance, corrupt the people of this generation. And he's coming to tattle or mean to the city as though it were his mother. And he alone seems to me to be starting out in public correctly or politics correctly. Because the correct way is to first pay attention to how our young people will be the best possible, just as a good farmer probably cares first for his young plants. And after this, to the corrupt, to others as well. And so Miletus too is presumably first rooting us out who corrupt the sprouting young people, as he puts it. After this, it's clear that having turned his attention to the older people, he will become a source of many great goods for the city. as is likely to happen to someone who starts off in this way. So what Socrates is saying is that Meletus is accusing him of corrupting the youth. Of corrupting the youth. With what? How is Socrates corrupting the youth? And that's an important part. So Euthyphro responds, he says, I wish it was so, Socrates, but I'm afraid that the opposite might happen. Because it seems to me by trying to wrong you, he is starting out by recklessly harming the health of the city. And tell me, just what does he say you are doing to corrupt the young? What is basically the accusation with respect to accusing Socrates? Strange things, Socrates says, at least to hear them described. But since he says, I am a maker of gods, and because I make novel gods and do not acknowledge the old ones, he indicts me for their sake. The accusation is that Socrates is introducing a new concept of God. Okay, a new concept of God. And as we read this, what is most important is the fact that Socrates would refer to God in the singular, which also implies that Socrates might be talking or referencing the concept of monotheism, in contrast to Greek polytheism, in contrast to the Greek worldview in which they worship many gods. Could it also be that Socrates was introducing the worship of one God? Again, Euthyphro says, I understand, Socrates, because you say the divine sign comes to you occasionally. Socrates receives divine signs. But what does that mean? Could it mean also that Socrates was a mystic, receiving this divine sign or signs from God? So, so you have the Greeks themselves were very polytheistic. And here you have Socrates introducing the youth to a concept of monotheism. Could that be the case? And so Meletus, who was a Greek, felt uneasy about that because most of the young people were following Socrates. And perhaps they were going back home to raise questions to their parents about the notion of the gods that the Greeks were worshiping. And this would be the question with respect to justice, with respect to piety, with respect to good. Again, Euthyphro says, you are being indicted because you claim to be receiving divine signs. Okay? Divine signs. He says he has lodged this indictment because of your innovation or innovative religious ideas. That's Euthyphro responding to Socrates. And so he's obviously coming to the court intending to slander you, knowing that such things are easily misrepresented to the many. Indeed, even in my case, whenever I say something in an assembly about religious matters, foretelling the future for them, they ridicule me as a madman. And yet I said nothing that was not true in what I told them, I foretold. Even so, they envy all of us who are like this. We should think nothing of them but fight them on their own ground. This is very important. Okay, here is Euthyphro saying to Socrates that you are being indicted because you claim to be receiving revelations or quote unquote prophecies or divine signs from God. And that you are being indicted because of your innovative religious ideas. What are the innovative religious ideas? At the beginning of this discussion, I said the Greeks were polytheistic. absolutely polytheistic. They had a pantheon of gods. But here you have Socrates talking about monotheism. Furthermore, his notion of talking about monotheism would also have a lot to do with a concept of justice, a concept of the pursuit of what is the good or what is good. Okay, so I think we should stop there, and we shall continue this another time. But I want to encourage you. This recording will be up on my website, which is georgewaltersleyon.com. And we'll be talking about these Platonic dialogues. Remember, from the beginning, we discussed Plato's mention of the sophists and how the sophists were the rival philosophical group to Socrates, and that Socrates really didn't like the sophists. Why? Because all of their concepts were relativistic and subjective, very subjective, everything based on experience. And Socrates would come on the scene to advance a sense of objectivity of truth. The sophists did not like that. Okay, the sophists did not like that. Socrates is indicted. In Euthyphro is about Socrates coming before the council because Miletus has brought an indictment against him. But then as you read it, you come to understand Socrates' own religious inclinations, religious positions. Because for Socrates, there is the quest for objective truth. There is the quest for objective truth. Okay? So I want to encourage you to read it. We will be back on Facebook next time, and this is going to be recorded on go on my website. I'll put it on my website. But thanks for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed this. Again, this is Dr. George Walters-Sleyon discussing what I call the Platonic Socratic dialogues, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you or hear from you next time. Thank you.